All right. Thank you for having us today. I want to say I'm sincerely sorry for the huge failure on my end with mismanagement on scheduling. Um, However, I'm very appreciative and thankful for y'all's flexibility. And as we're talking about some of the positive and negative impacts of social media and technology, this is one of those positives, right? When things like this happen, we can make it
Yeah.
work electronically. Um, my name is Isidra Cook. I am the executive director of Breaking the Silence New Mexico. We are a nonprofit located here in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and we go into the schools, communities, and organizations all across the state of New Mexico and provide free mental health education about mental health, mental illness, and suicide awareness and prevention. And through a lot of our own personal stories and education, we really work to normalize the conversation when it comes to mental health and break a lot of that stigma that continues to surround mental illness and suicide that really affects and impacts people from reaching out for help. Um, on the 10th of December, we're going to be coming into your school and talking to your students about social media and its impact on mental health. And so today, as parents, I kind of wanted to just give you a little bit of a highlight of what some of your students will be receiving. It's not exactly the same as this presentation, but this is more adapted to teachers and parents, because it's also important that the adults who are in their lives are understanding and aware of how high social media usage can affect and impact younger generation's mental health. Is it going to let me click down? Okay, sorry. I'm trying to figure out, navigate here, how to, I'm guessing it's this way. Okay. Is the screen changing?
Yes, ma'am, it is.
Okay, great. So our objectives that kind of get an understanding is the positive and negatives of social media and smart devices. A lot of this presentation kind of highlights a lot of the negatives, but we want to, also acknowledge that there are a lot of great positives that come from, smart devices and social media. Understand why social media is addictive, especially to teens. Understand how social media can become addictive, and how to implement those healthy coping mechanisms and to help support a better relationship when it comes to proper usage and managing our time on social media. And so I'm kind of curious, I'm not probably able to see everyone, but I kind of want to see, if possible, a show of hands of who uses or is on social media daily. How many hands have gone up? Quite a bit. Okay, maybe so. Yes. So it's very common, right? And it's very common to be using social media and be on those platforms. Who spends at least 3 to 4 hours a day on social media?
3 to 4 hours.
No.
We have one.
That's not one. All right. Well, just a fun little fact here. Just a little fun fact here is, if you spend at least 3 hours of scrolling on social media and multiply that by 365 days of the year and divide those by a 40-hour work week, you would be spending the equivalent of 27 work weeks scrolling on social media per year. There's a lot I could do with 27 weeks of work. Just to highlight how much, we are spending. And our teens, that, 3 hours is nothing for them to spend scrolling on social media. And so we know that technology is advancing and improving every day, and it's become a huge part of our lives, especially for our younger generation. On one hand, it provides a platform for connection and support, but excessive use and exposure do a lot of those unrealistic standards contribute to issues like anxiety, low self-esteem, this, self-worth, this fear of missing out? And in fact, recently the U.S. Surgeon General put out a health advisory that we are in a teen mental health crisis, and that is more related to social media and the usage of social media. 95% of youth in ages 13 to 17 report using social media platforms at least constantly. And so that's where we're seeing that it's contributed to a lot of that anxiety and depression and emotional regulation. I don't know if videos are going to play or not, but this is just kind of a little bit of a sarcastic video if it will play that we don't show our teens this, but just a highlight of our role as adults when it comes to teaching our children how to use proper usage in social media. So if it plays, let me know.
Hey, kiddo, it's about time for
It's
bed.
playing. That's fine.
Okay?
Are
Okay.
we able to hear it? Is it playing?
Yes, ma'am. It's playing. We're good.
Great.
Well, remember, there's a box in the corner over there with all the pornographic material that's ever been made in the world, even the really weird stuff that could scar you for life. I'm trusting you not to look in there, okay?
Okay.
Feelings are for losers.
Oh, and this guy's gonna be in your corner all night, just randomly spewing out hateful things. Just ignore him, okay? While I'm thinking of it, there's an order form on your desk where you can purchase illegal drugs. The mean girls from your school are gonna be standing there talking about you all night. And this Russian hacker's gonna keep asking for your password.
I'm not hacker. Amazon customer service.
Just need you to ignore him, okay? Love you, buddy.
We ask too much of our kids when we give them a smartphone. Let's change the norm. Together.
Maybe we go around the room and share social security numbers.
Join the movement at smartphonefreechildhoodus.com.
Right.
I'll get it.
So that kind of just gives a little bit of a highlight of, how powerful those devices and tools are and how they can have, how much our kids have access to when it comes to social media. So we're going to skip this little bingo activity. This data right here kind of just shows that, it's realistic for us now to say it's just become a normal part of our life when it comes to, technology. And we've seen over the years that as a society, we have just had a huge reliance when it comes to technology, and it has continued to increase over the decades and the years. As we continue to see or show evidence of high usage within our society, it's important to show what age children are becoming primed to being addicted to social media and technology use. According to the American Academy of Pediatrics, a little over a third of children are using technology by the age of 2. 34% of those children are already accessing laptops and cell phones, and 20% are accessing iPads. And although there's yet to be a lot of research to show how these smart devices are impacting the development brain at that stage, studies have shown that high usage of smart devices have a negative impact when it comes to our social and emotional learning. And I've yet to seen this myself until the other day. I was actually at a state volleyball game, my niece's state volleyball game last week, and this lady had her grandchild who was less than 1 years old, and she has her sitting there in her lap with her phone right in front of this little baby, just watching, and that baby's already just grabbing the phone, trying to move things on the phone. And so it was really interesting how, it was being placed in an environment I didn't think was quite appropriate or needed. But these technology devices are becoming more and more usage as, essentially babysitters. It's really difficult when parents are overwhelmed, they're anxious, they're stressed, they have a dysregulated child. And so now technology has kind of been essentially that quick fix to help their child, distract. And the thing about that is it's impacting their emotional regulation and affecting their ability to learn how to emotionally regulate. And that has an impact long term when it comes to their emotional regulation when they're, teenagers and then into adulthood. So something to be a little bit mindful of. And this is another statistic with the Surgeon General, just kind of seeing a little bit of some of those highlights of how the high usage of technology is contributing to those mental health symptoms that we're seeing of feeling, sadness and hopelessness and depression and anxiety. And so the more we're spending on social media, the higher at risk of developing those mental illnesses there is. And so, of course, like I said, there's positive outcomes when it comes to, social media and technology use. Um, Social media has brought several positive impacts, on our society with proper usage and has many benefits when it comes to connecting on social media platforms. We're able to stay more in touch and connected if we have a family member that, goes across country and, we're able to still easily have access to communicate and check in on them. However, high connection can also have the other side of the coin of a negative impact. People have a little bit more access into to knowing your business, and that can become very overwhelming at times. Information and access, it's really easy to access a lot of important news, those updates, information of various topics, current worldwide events that are going on. A lot of great fundraisers have happened because of social media. People have been able to help other people in crisis and donate and advocate because of that. It's great when it comes to network and professional growth. Of course, there's the aspect of research and education. It's definitely played a positive role in some of our education. We've seen where it's like when we stopped to write a research paper, we'd have to go to the library and look at our sources. And now you're able to have quick access to that when it comes online. That support in the community. A lot of people find great support groups when it comes to maybe something that they are dealing with, such as health issues or personal struggles. They can connect with people. I've seen people with MS or, depression or, eating disorders, and they've connected with other people who are going through the same thing that they might not feel like they're able to access in their internal environment. Um, and so, how does social media impact our youth brain? And so, as we know, our children's brains are still under construction. There's a lot of hormones going on, a lot of changes are happening in that brain, and that prefrontal cortex in the very front of our brain is still underdeveloped. And that part of the region of the brain is, associated with, impulse control, emotional regulation, and reasoning, and moderating that social behavior. And so that's why it's so difficult for teens to put down electronics. And so as adults, it's kind of up to us to be that prefrontal cortex for teens.
One second, we lost sound. Once you said impulse control, and then
Okay. Great. So yeah, it's important for impulse control, emotional regulation, reasoning, and moderating that social behavior. And so this is why it's difficult for teens to put down electronics. So as the adults in their life, it's kind of up to us to be that prefrontal cortex for them and help set that boundary. There's a lot of dopamine that gets, generated into their brain when they're on social media. They're posting a picture and they get likes and they get followers, and that reactivates that dopamine inhibitor in their brain that's actually related to drug use. And so imagine what it's like for someone who's addicted to drugs, and having, and then just completely removing the drugs from them. They go in that dopamine deficit. They go through withdrawals, and that's actually similar to what happens to our teen when we're asking them to dissociate from social media or their technology. Is they're not getting as high of that dopamine reinforcement that they would when it comes to social media. And so that dopamine enhancement is really important when it comes to attracting their time and manipulating them into staying on those devices longer. And so that can be really, really scary when it comes to an underdeveloped brain. So we're going to watch this little clip here to kind of sum it all up.
Are you scrolling? It's probably how you found this video. How long you watched the video, how many likes, comments, shares, influences what you see.
Travel pillows? We've been wearing them the wrong way.
Shut up.
Although what you do on social media may seem insignificant to your overall well-being, it does matter.
Supposed to twist the seasoning bottle? I'll show you.
Twist it.
Well, social media has essentially taken human connection and turned it into a drug by distilling it down to the essential properties that make something addictive.
For others, social media has been a place where they found lost family members, organ donors.
So if you have a boat,
Meaningful life events that have happened around the world. But cell phones and social media are so deeply connected to every aspect of our lives. Our work, family, school, that most experts say we can't easily quit. And to understand why social media is so addictive, we have to look into how our brain works. The brain controls thought, memory, emotion, along with all the 5 senses and every process that regulates our body. All those tasks are performed by pathways, where the brain sends messages to the nervous system, and the nervous system sends messages back. We'll focus on the brain's reward system. Here is where dopamine is mostly produced, a type of neurotransmitter also called a feel-good hormone. That is sent to 4 pathways. One of those is the mesolimbic dopamine pathway, which is connected to the amygdala and the hippocampus. The first processes emotion, while the latter is essential for learning and memory. Too much or too little dopamine affects how we learn, get motivated, our mood, attention, our heart rate, and many other behaviors and physical functions. And this is where studies show the addictiveness of social media.
When we engage with social media, it releases a lot of dopamine in the brain's reward pathway, lights up the same part of the brain as drugs and alcohol. It's incredibly accessible. We have 24/7 access to this particular drug. It's bountiful in the sense that it's practically speaking infinite. TikTok never runs out. And number 4, it's incredibly novel. The AI algorithms learn what we've liked before and actually push to us the suggestion that we want to keep going or check out the next new thing.
In late May, the Surgeon General put out an advice.
And we're going to talk a little bit about some of those AI generatings and engineering behind a lot of that. So as we can see, this is a bigger and more extensive list of some of the negative impacts, when it comes to social media and smart devices compared to the positive. And so it is a two-sided coin. And so we can all agree that they have become a huge distraction. They've become a distraction in the classrooms. They've become a distraction at home. They've just become a distraction in relationships. That lack of privacy that I was talking about earlier, like there is a little bit of lack of privacy when we are putting things out there, or, now you can follow people, you can have access to, track their devices. And so sometimes that can have a negative consequence or stir up kind of some what we call social drama. And they're addicting. Of course, we've established that. One of the things, and we'll discuss some of the statistics, and that's around sextortion, but it's really important to highlight, sextortion is something that we are seeing happen more and more often. And now it's starting to be something that they're doing to each other. And so in some following slides, I'll kind of talk a little bit more in depth about that. It sets us up to an opportunity to get easily scammed. We become a little bit more vulnerable to, have our information stolen, or fall into a trap of being manipulated to, engage in some type of scamming. It creates, stigma and false information. It can really, manipulate our perception, our opinion about something, due to the information that we might have access to. Negative or false information actually travels 6 times faster than true information. And so that's really important to recognize how much false information that we're getting easy access to. Easy access to exposure and to inappropriate content. We're getting a lot of reports from parents and teachers that, our younger boys are having more or easier access to pornography on their social media devices, and their smartphones, and they have seen a change in their behavior. Cyberbullying, bullying is kind of something we've always been dealing with, over years. But that cyberbullying has intensified and really increased because we become a little bit more braver when we have a phone, device in between us. And students are creating platforms to bully each other. They're creating platforms to post, gossip and drama, not really having consideration or thinking about how this can have a negative impact on someone's mental health and self-esteem. There's FOMO, that fear of missing out. If you have a group of girls and these girls were hanging out over the weekend and didn't invite you, but you saw it on Snapchat and you're seeing how much of a great time they're having, that can create a lot of emotions and feelings around being left out. It's because now we're able to kind of look more into people's life, which kind of comes down to social comparison. Now we have all of these, celebrities who get paid to, let us into their lives, this, glorious, glamorous type of expectation. And when we're able to look into more of that and then reflect on our own life going on, that can create some social comparison that has an impact when it comes to our self-worth. Difficulty detaching and regulating in the real world creates disruptions in relationships, and can cause drama and emotional exhaustion. And that has an impact in, transfers into the classroom. Students are having a hard time regulating and focusing on their education, or maybe even being present at home with family when some kind of drama has happened online and disruption in the relationship, and they're having easy access to communicate and connect through that drama. So a lot of the reality around that engineering of why, that AI algorithm, like, the previous video, is they do know how to essentially psychologically hijack the brain. And there's no better audience or, attraction than to teens because of that underdeveloped brain and because it feels good when they get that dopamine hit. And so the more time they spend scrolling on those social media platforms, the more those social media platforms get money generated. And so they're designed to actually try and keep you scrolling as long as you can. They're essentially outsmarting the brain. They can track, what individuals are in the same, vicinity, and attract things like that. How many times have you said, oh, my washer broke, I need to go, I'm gonna have to go this weekend and buy a washer. And then you get on social media and then there's all these ads from Lowe's and Home Depot, and you're like, that's creepy. How did it know I was? And that is because those AI generating and those engineerings within our social media devices are hearing and listening and paying attention to what's going on, that they can manipulate our brain into attracting that. So if I was to go on Facebook and I saw an ad for a new washer and sale, and I clicked on that ad and bought me a washer, not only is Lowe's going to get money, but now Facebook's going to get money, because they attracted my attention to buy that device. And so it's really scary when, I don't think there's any parents that really want to hear that their teenagers are actually being manipulated and their psychology is essentially being hijacked by other, systems. It's really scary. Sexting is something that has, become a big thing amongst our teens. It's sharing sexually explicit images, videos, or messages through electronic means. And so a lot of the work we're trying to do is really help these teens understand, what position they're putting themselves in when they are sharing that vulnerable content to others. We can't always trust other people. And how can this affect you long term if you want to get a government job? Just because you think Snapchat, it goes away in 10 seconds, it doesn't mean that it can, exactly go away forever. If somebody screenshots, they have, control over that picture of you. And we don't know what what can come of that. 1 in 4 teens are receiving sexually explicit texts and emails. 1 in 7 teens are sending sex. More than 10 teens are forwarding sex without consent. And so again, that's really scary if someone's trusting somebody with an explicit image and you don't know, if they're showing it to their buddies or their friends. 1 in 12 teens have had sex, even they've sent forwarded without their consent. And so one of the things that we're teaching youth about is the importance of accessing the Take It Down, which helps remove online nude, partially nude, or sexually explicit photos and videos. That if something was to get posted, that there is resources out there that can help them take it down. But as adults and parents and teachers, it's really important that we're highlighting this and talking to our teens about having appropriate relationships with these smart devices, and being mindful about what we're sharing when it with our bodies and our faces and things like that. Because what we also see is, sextortion. Again, we can't always trust the other person we're sending those, explicit images to. And sextortion has been something that we have seen an increase in over time, that has led to a lot of suicides. And so sextortion is essentially where, it started out where these two individuals overseas had created a false um, Instagram account that, of a young girl or a young boy, and they reached out to teens to get them to add them, and then developed a relationship with them and talked them into, sending them explicit photos. And then once they did, they blackmailed them and said, if you don't send me $2,000, I'm going to send this to everyone in your contacts. And when you have an underdeveloped brain, it's very challenging to process and regulate around a high crisis like that. Teens are scared to reach out to their parents because are they going to get in trouble? And so these teens are thinking that the only way that they can get out of this corner is that they end their own life. And now what we're starting to see.
Bluetooth pairing. Bluetooth connected.
Okay. I think we're back on. Go ahead.
Okay, sorry. Unfortunately, what we're starting to see is teens are doing this to each other. And so it's really important to be teaching our youth that, helping them be mindful that you don't know what someone can do if you're sending explicit photos. AI has become a very, common thing when it comes to our everyday life now. We're starting to become a lot more dependent on AI sometimes. And there's definitely some positive things when it comes to AI, quick access to info, education, creativity. We've seen it as, being a really great tool with people with disabilities. But there is a lot, with everything, there's a two-sided coin. And so there's definitely some negatives that come from it. And this is just a huge list, cheating and plagiarism. We've seen students using this and teens using this when it comes to their homework. It can generate inaccurate information. And so those AI, bots are kind of designed to please you. They're kind of designed to tell you what you really want to hear in a really great communicative factor. And so we have actually seen teens who have formed relationships with AI bots and have ended up ending their life due to AI. And so there has been some negative influence on AI connected to suicide. Scams, sextortion, impersonation. You can easily create a nude photo with someone else's face when it comes to those AI bots, unfortunately, and then that has created some issues. We're also starting to get report that, students have AI generated false text messages and conversations with them between them and another student, and then told teachers or principals like so-and-so said this to me when it was really an AI generated conversation. And so it's really affecting a lot of relationships. I've even seen some of my own clients who will get in altercations with their friends or their boyfriends and girlfriends, and then they will put it in AI on how to respond to them to help, alleviate that conversation. And so that can be really misleading and misguiding and ungenuine, because on their end, they're thinking, oh, this is how my partner's really emotionally communicating to me, when really it's an AI generated bot on the other end that did that. So I'm curious to know, for parents that are in the room, what are some of the things that you're seeing as challenges when it comes to your children and those smart devices? Any thoughts, any concerns that you're experiencing? Okay. That is okay. This, oh, okay, giving them a time.
They're putting
Yes.
them in the chat.
Okay, great. Yes, giving them a time limit. That is a challenge. Yeah, there's a lot of, pushback, I imagine, when it comes to giving them a time limit, and trying to hold them to that boundary, for sure. Anything else?
So I'm going to give some feedback from students that we work with at school, because myself and the other counselor were constantly it's job security, these phones. There's constant conflict, lots of inappropriate text messages. I feel like kids have completely turned to the internet to try to figure out how to start relationships, romantic relationships, and it's gone really wrong. Can you think of anything else, Jess? It's promoting, like kids are doing their little groups where they're promoting self-harm. Yeah.
Because of school. They're missing, they're staying up all night.
Yeah, not coming to school is probably one of the biggest battles that we have, because they can't get up in the morning. They don't drop that phone from their hands till 3 a.m, 4 a.m, and then they can't get here.
Yeah. And that is definitely something we also talk to them about in our social media presentation that we present to students, is helping them understand that as a teenager, you need more sleep. Your brain is underdeveloped. You have a lot of hormones, going and flooding through your body right now. And so you're actually at an age where you should be getting a proper amount of sleep. And the statistics that we have gathered so far, the data that we've gathered, we're getting reports that students are getting less than 5 hours of sleep a night because they're on their smart devices. And that's going to be really scary how long term that's going to affect their brain, because now we have teens who are, sleep deprived, their brain's underdeveloped, they're getting a lot of dopamine access, through social media, and then, a lot of access of information of trying to stay focused in school. And so it would make sense why this is having a negative effect on depression, anxiety, self-esteem, because they're not essentially feeling healthy. They're not getting a proper amount of sleep, and they're essentially connected to that term of drugs with their social media. And it isn't impacting their ability to be able to properly function in school. And so, yes, we're really trying to encourage and help parents understand, not, how do you start setting that boundary and expectation in your home with your child, about this is the rule, this is the expectation, and this is the boundary, but also helping them understand, I'm not just doing this to be, a nagging parent or controlling, like helping your child understand this is what, the importance of why I am trying to help you learn how to set a time limit with your phone, because these are the effects that it can have, versus I'm just being a parent and I'm just going to take your phone away. Great. All right. It's going to let me switch here. So some schools have reported doing like cyber civics, of like implementing lessons like this into their classroom to start, teaching students about, from a very young age at 4th grade, they're starting to help students understand how social media and technology plays a role in their life, and how are we forming those, those relationships. Schools have been doing challenging weeks of, encouraging them to detox from their phone, and what did you notice is going on. Schools, really struggling to set regulations and ban zones around those. And the challenge is that we get a lot of information from teachers, is the struggle is the relationship with parents. It's so important that parents and teachers are coming together and working together and supporting one another when it comes to the expectation of setting those boundaries for your child. And I know a lot of parents get anxious about their child not having their phones because of safety reasons, and, go back and forth with schools and fighting with schools, because of their child not being able to have their phone. And I think it's hard sometimes for parents to understand, because they're not in the school to see and hear what the challenges are that teachers are having, and how it's having a negative effect and impact on their ability to learn. And so it's really going to be important that teachers and parents are setting the same expectation and the same boundary, because if a teacher sets a rule in their classroom and my dad doesn't care, give a crap, and is against that rule, I'm not going to have respect for the expectation of that teacher sending me or setting for me, and I'm going to give some pushback. A Nova app is a really great app for parents to use. So there are certain apps on there that you can have that can monitor how much time your child is spending on certain platforms. And you can actually have control over their app. And so if your child is up at midnight on this app, you can cut them off on that app and keep them from continuing to be scrolling. Some of those apps you can set up where there's certain time limits. And so parents aren't quite aware that there are those apps that they can connect to their child's phone to set those limits. There's also a certain phone, I don't remember the name of it off the top of my head, I'm sorry, that it actually is only for text messaging and calling. You're not able to actually download some of those apps. And so if you have a younger child that, is probably not ready at an age level to be able to even be on those apps, that can be a really good type of phone to start them out with. These are just great conversations to have with your students, and your children. And it's really getting to know, that this is just their reality. We have two generations right now. We have one generation, that knows a world without that high technology and those smart devices and how to function in our world. And then our younger generation that they only know a world with social media and smart devices. So this is normal to them. They think this is just their reality. And if we have, the adults in their life, who are there to protect them and show them the way and guide them, are also doing it and not having a healthy relationship with their smart devices, or just giving them easy access to this and not really teaching them about them. They're thinking they're safe. They're thinking that it's okay because their parents are like, well, my parents gave it to me. So it's really getting to have those conversations and understanding more of their world and their relationship. Asking them what those social media platforms are that they, are using most. What is it about those social media platforms that you like? What are you getting out of them? Have you ever encountered something online that made you feel uncomfortable? Have you ever experienced bullying? How did you handle it? How did it affect you? What did you do about it? What steps do you take to protect your privacy online? How much do you know about, the importance of protecting your privacy? How do you handle conflicts and disagreements online? How do you know when you're overwhelmed and you've had too much, time on social media? How aware are you that it affects your ability to function and balance everyday life activities? And so really start fostering those communications, or those conversations with youth are very important. So then they're able to start feeling like they can come to us and talk to us about what's going on. These are just important conversations for teachers and parents to be having about, as parents, how do you monitor the amount of time your child's spending on the smart devices? It's hard because you're not constantly and always with them. So really knowing and having an idea of how much time they spend. What are the expectations that you have for your home? What is the boundaries, that you have set in your home around your child's phone usage and their schoolwork? How much are you, formalizing that expectation that school is a priority over the amount of time, we're using our phones? What are those boundaries during bedtime? We talked about that, right? It's really important that our youth are getting the proper amount of sleep. And this makes your job harder as a parent as well too, because now you're fighting with your child, trying to get them motivated, trying to get them going, trying to get them up. They become more moody, they become, more irritable. And a lot of that can be tied to not getting the proper amount of sleep and overstimulation on their smart devices. How much are you checking in with your child on their mental health? If you're noticing there's a lot more, anxiety or depression, what's going on with their relationship, with social media and those smart devices. How are you monitoring and supporting your children when it comes to cyberbullying? It is very intense how the cyberbullying is happening. And we do have another lesson that we present to our students around bullying and helping students understand that these are, you can really negatively affect someone's life by bullying. And these devices are really powerful tools and can really affect and change someone's life forever if you are not careful with them. Just some more actions that, parents can even do is, supporting the schools around those expectations and, staying on top of the latest trends, paying attention to, their sleeping patterns, fostering those discussions and, modeling positive relationships with our smart devices. If we have, our parents who are also, on their phones during dinner time or family interaction time and not engaging, we're setting in that presence for them that it's okay, and we're modeling that for them. And so this is just I'm not sure. Sorry. This might be a really good documentary to watch together as a family and with your child to start opening that dialogue of conversation around their social media usage. It's called The Social Dilemma. It's on Netflix. It's a really great documentary. I had the honor of being on a platform with one of these engineers' wife, Laura Gomez, and her husband were engineers on TikTok. And some of the work in their role and knowing what it's doing to our society, knowing what it's doing around manipulation and having a negative effect on mental health, ended up causing them to quit their job because they are just like, we could not ethically sit with what is going on and contribute to this. And so this is a really great little trailer to kind of get an idea of what that documentary is like.
When you go to Google and type in climate change is, you're going to see different results depending on where you live and the particular things that Google knows about your interests.
That's not by accident, that's a design technique. What I want people to know is that everything they're doing online is being watched, is being tracked. Every single action you take is carefully monitored and recorded.
A lot of people think Google's just a search box and Facebook's just a place to see what my friends are doing. What they don't realize is there's entire teams of engineers whose job is to use your psychology against you.
I was the co-inventor of the Facebook like button.
I was the president of Pinterest,
Google, Twitter, Instagram.
There were meaningful changes happening around the world because of these platforms. I think we were naive about the flip side of that coin.
We get rewarded by hearts, likes, thumbs up, and we conflate that with value and we conflate it with truth.
A whole generation is more anxious, more depressed.
I always felt like fundamentally it was a force for good. I don't know if I feel that way anymore.
Facebook discovered that they were able to affect real-world behavior and emotions without ever triggering the user's awareness. They are completely clueless.
Fake news spreads 6 times faster than true news. We're being bombarded with rumors.
If everyone's entitled to their own facts, there's really no need for people to come together. In fact, there's really no need for people to interact.
We have less control over who we are and what we really believe.
If you want to control the population of your country, there has never been a tool as effective as Facebook.
We built these things and we have a responsibility to change it. The intention could be, how do we make the world better? If technology creates mass chaos, loneliness, more polarization, more election hacking, more inability to focus on the real issues, we're toast.
This is checkmate on humanity.
So like I said, it'd be a really great documentary to watch in your home and, with your child and kind of open that discussion and conversation. So this is just a menu of the different types of lessons that we provide, to teachers, students, and parents. We have our Talking Mental Health curriculum that dives more into mental illness, the warning signs, talks about their stress and the importance of caring, for their self-care and a lot of suicide awareness and prevention in there. We do a mental health toolbox, which is a little bit more interactive around helping them do some reflecting and build out their own self-care and, practicing some of those coping skills and mechanisms when it comes to struggling with stress, anxiety, depression. Um, we have a curriculum that is suicide awareness and prevention, where we actually do a little bit more of a deeper, thorough dive into the discussion about suicide awareness and prevention. And we have our lesson on bullying and its impact on mental health. It says for 4th and 12th graders, it's actually for middle school through 12th. Social media, of course, is what we'll be doing on the 10th. And talking to them about, social media and their relationship with these devices. And then we have a different parent forum. It's about an hour and a half to 3 hours. And that gives the whole holistic wraparound on, awareness around mental health and a lot of, warning signs. We talk about generational trauma. And how to build a lot of those conversations, when it comes to your child's mental health. We're actually going to be starting to promote those next year online via telehealth on a, every quarter. So parents have multiple opportunities to participate in those, in their own with their own flexibility. And then, of course, professional development for schools, teachers, or any other community members. And that is all I have for you. I feel like I didn't leave a lot of time for questions and feedback. If there are any concerns, questions, food for thought?
Anybody? Questions? Comments?
No.
No.
No, thank you.
No. Thank you so much. We appreciate you.
Yeah, my pleasure. Brenda has my email, so if you ever have any questions that come up, feel free to reach out.
Sounds good.
Excellent. Thank you so much. We appreciate it.
Good morning. Thank you for your flexibility. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
I just want to